When Zuri ran off with wealthy tycoon Baresa and George, Luyanda felt like his whole world collapsed. One moment he had a family, and the next he was standing alone in their tiny Solani town apartment, holding his confused 4-year-old son Kito. People whispered behind his back. Some laughed openly. "Your wife upgraded," they told him. Luyanda just lowered his head and kept fixing cars at his small mechanic shop, doing whatever he could to keep life steady for Kito. One hot afternoon everything changed. A governor's convoy broke down on the highway, and no mechanic was available. Except Luyanda. He arrived with his old toolbox, hands shaking, hoping he wouldn't embarrass himself. But once he opened the engine, his confidence returned. In less than 20 minutes, he repaired the convoy's main vehicle and even improved the engine performance. Someone posted the whole moment online. By the next morning, Luyanda was everywhere. News channels, social media, interviews. People called him the genius mechanic of Solani. Within weeks, he was hired to design engines, and his business exploded. Suddenly, the man everyone mocked became the country's top auto engineer. Months later, Zuri appeared at his door, makeup ruined by tears. She said Baresa had left her. She said she missed her family. She said she wanted a fresh start. Luyanda didn't speak. He just watched Kito step back, hiding behind his leg. The little boy grabbed his father's shirt and whispered, voice trembling, "Daddy, don't let her hurt us again." Luyanda looked down at his son, his whole heart, his whole reason for surviving. And in that moment, he knew the door behind him wasn't opening. It was finally closing. Jabari Mwazigwa still remembered the way Nalia walked out that night, calm, confident, holding Zane's little backpack like she wasn't breaking a family apart. She told Jabari he had no ambition, that billionaire investor Cairo Tembo could give their son a better life. Jabari begged her to stay. Zane cried and clung to his mother's leg. But Nalia brushed him off and drove away in Cairo's shiny black car, her eyes full of the life she thought she deserved. For days, Jabari barely slept. The house felt empty, too quiet, too cold. He had no money and no plan, so he took the only job available, repairing old fishing boats at Lake Nembi. The pay was low, the work was dirty, but Zane needed food, school clothes, and a father who didn't give up. Every morning, Jabari carried his son on his shoulders and whispered, "We'll be okay. I promise." One afternoon, dark clouds rolled in fast. The lake turned wild. A small boat carrying 3 local children flipped over. Without thinking, Jabari dove into the freezing water. Waves crashed over him, and fishermen shouted from the shore, but he kept going. He pulled the children out one by one, holding 2 against his chest while pushing the 3rd ahead of him. Someone recorded the entire rescue on their phone. By evening, the video had spread everywhere. People were calling him a hero. News reporters came to Lake Nembi looking for the brave father who risked his life. Donations poured in. Organizations offered him work, training, and sponsorships. Jabari suddenly found himself being interviewed on television, talking about lake safety, community work, and fatherhood. The country loved him, his humility, his courage, his devotion to Zane. He became a national inspiration almost overnight. Months later, just when life felt peaceful again, Nalia appeared at his gate. Her expensive clothes looked worn, her hair messy, her eyes full of panic. Cairo Tembo had gone bankrupt in a massive scandal. Fraud, corruption, everything collapsed. She had nowhere to go. She tried to smile softly and whispered, "Jabari, I made a mistake. Can we be a family again?" Jabari didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't say anything cruel. He had changed too much for that. Behind him, little Zane peeked out. Nalia opened her arms and said, "Zane, baby, mommy is back." But Zane stepped closer to his father, grabbed Jabari's hand tightly, and looked at his mother with eyes full of hurt and confusion. Then he turned his face away. He refused to even look at her. In that quiet moment, Nalia realized what she had truly lost. Not money, not comfort, but the love of the 2 people she abandoned. And Jabari finally understood that the better life Nalia chased was never better than the one he built with his son. When Miremba packed her bags and left, Tendai felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. She didn't even argue or hide it. She simply said she was tired of struggling, and that Darius Kafuma, the billionaire who loved showing off his wealth, could give her and their son Neo the life they deserved. Before Tendai could process it, she was gone, driving toward the tall gates of Maji Gardens where Darius lived in a mansion filled with fountains, gold decorations, and parties every night. Tendai went home to an empty apartment that suddenly felt too big. He stared at Neo's toys on the floor and wondered how Miremba could walk away so easily. But whenever he closed his eyes, he remembered his son's little voice saying, "Daddy, you'll come for me, right?" That promise pushed him forward. He took every job he could find. By day, he fixed computers in a dusty shop. In the evenings, he worked as a delivery driver. And at night, when everyone else slept, Tendai sat at his old laptop learning coding, design, and business. Some nights he fell asleep at the table. Some nights he cried quietly because he missed Neo so much. But he kept going. Months later, Tendai created a small tech app that helped local businesses manage payments. First, nobody cared. But one day, a major influencer shared it online, and everything exploded. Investors called non-stop. Tech magazines wrote about him. Within a year, Tendai's startup spread across multiple African countries. He hired a team, moved into a penthouse, and finally gained full custody of Neo when Miremba became too caught up in Darius's wild lifestyle to even show up for court. Neo adapted fast. He loved the new home, the rooftop garden, and the way Tendai always sat with him before bed, reading stories and talking about dreams. Their bond grew stronger every day. Then the news broke. Darius Kafuma had been arrested for money laundering. Suddenly, the glamorous life Miremba chased disappeared. The mansion was seized. The cars vanished. The friends who once praised her stopped answering her calls. Desperate and out of options, she went looking for the man she once mocked for being too simple. She arrived at Tendai's building expecting the same struggling husband she had left. Instead, she stepped into a marble lobby with security and an elevator that opened into a breathtaking penthouse. She found Tendai sitting on a couch, calm and peaceful, reading a book aloud while Neo leaned against him, smiling. Miremba froze. Her eyes widened. This wasn't the man she walked away from. This was a father who had fought his way to the top. Tendai looked up slowly. Neo looked at her, confused and distant. And in that silence, Miremba understood the painful truth. The family she abandoned didn't just move on, they thrived without her. When Hannah left, she didn't leave quietly. She made sure the whole world saw it. Every day she posted selfies with billionaire Rafiko Daira, by his pool in his cars on private jets, writing captions like, "Finally living the life I deserve." Lulamo tried not to look, but the photos found him anyway. People in Kimbizi village whispered. Some even laughed behind his back. Still, he held his little boy Yarrow close and said, "Mama made her choice. But we're still a family, you and me." Life was simple but peaceful. Lulamo woke before sunrise, cooked breakfast, carried Yarrow on his back to school, then walked to the small workshop behind their house. He fixed broken tools, old radios, anything people brought to him. One afternoon, during a severe water shortage, he started tinkering with old parts, pipes, bicycle wheels, metal scraps. He stayed up all night, welding and adjusting gears. By morning, he had created a small manual water pump that could pull clean water from deep underground without electricity. The villagers were amazed. A teacher filmed it and shared the video online. Within days, the video went viral. Engineers, universities, and government officials came to see the device for themselves. Soon, Lulamo was invited to present his invention internationally. He stood on a giant stage, hands shaking, while the audience cheered for the humble man from Kimbizi village. When he won a major global innovation award, he could barely speak. All he thought about was Yarrow, how far they had come together. Lulamo's life transformed. He moved into a new home, started a company that built affordable pumps for rural areas, and hired people from his community. And somewhere along the way, he met Amani, a gentle, warm-hearted woman who adored Yarrow and supported Lulamo's dreams. She didn't want luxury, she wanted a family. Yarrow quickly grew attached to her, following her everywhere, calling her Mama Amani. Then one evening, months after disappearing, Hannah showed up. Gone were the glamorous clothes. She looked tired, stressed, and heartbroken. Rafik had abandoned her for another woman when money troubles hit. She had nowhere to go. Hanover's eyes softened when she saw Yero's toys scattered around the living room. She whispered, "Lulamo, I made a mistake. I want my family back." Before Lulamo could answer, little Yero walked in. Hannah bent down, opening her arms wide. "Baby mama is here." Yero blinked, then ran straight to Amani, wrapping his arms tightly around her waist. "Mama," he cried. Hannah froze. Her mouth opened then closed. Her own son didn't recognize her place anymore. Lulamo gently stepped forward, his voice calm. "You left us to chase a life that never cared about you. We built something real here. We healed." Hannah stared at the three of them, Lulamo, Amani, and Yero, standing together like a complete family. And she finally understood. She was the outsider now. When Thandi walked out the door that night, Kwesi Afolabi felt like someone had ripped his chest open. She didn't even try to make it gentle. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Kwesi, you'll never be successful. Chikondi can give me and Sefu the life you never will." Then she packed her bags, took their 4-year-old son's clothes, and left with billionaire mogul Chikondi Bonda, leaving Kwesi standing alone in their quiet, unfinished home. Sefu cried for days. Kwesi held him every night, whispering, "Daddy is here. I won't leave you." But when the house fell silent again, Kwesi let himself break. He felt humiliated, abandoned, and angry, but more than anything he felt determined. He had one job now: raise his son and build something real. Kwesi's carpentry workshop was small, just a shed behind the house with old tools and piles of wood. One morning, he heard that the local school didn't have enough desks. Without thinking twice, he offered to build some for free. He worked day and night, sanding wood while Sefu napped, carving names into the desks while his son played with wood scraps on the floor. When he delivered the furniture, a teacher filmed it, Kwesi smiling shyly, kids cheering, Sefu sitting proudly on one of the desks. The video spread like wildfire across social media. People loved his kindness, his craftsmanship, and his devotion to his son. Suddenly, orders for furniture poured in from everywhere: schools, offices, luxury homes. Investors reached out, offering to expand his business. Overnight, his tiny backyard shed grew into a full carpentry company with dozens of workers and contracts across the country. Kwesi moved into a new home, enrolled Sefu in a good school, and began living a life he never imagined. He didn't chase success. It came to him because of his heart. Then, months later, Thandi showed up. Her hair was messy, her clothes worn, her eyes desperate. Chikondi Bonda had dropped her for a younger woman. The money, the trips, the gifts gone. She stood at Kwesi's gate trembling. "Kwesi, please, I made a mistake. I want my family back." Kwesi stepped outside slowly. He wasn't angry anymore. He was calm, steady, a man who had rebuilt himself from ashes. Sefu came running out, but instead of going to her, he grabbed his father's hand and hid behind him. Thandi reached out with shaking fingers. "Sefu, baby." But the little boy stepped farther back, looking confused and afraid. Kwesi took a deep breath. His voice was soft but firm. "Thandi, we're not your backup plan." She froze. Her mouth quivered, but no words came. Kwesi didn't shout, didn't insult her. He simply closed the door gently. And for the first time, Thandi finally understood. She didn't just lose a husband. She lost the future she didn't believe in, until it wasn't hers anymore. When Nalafa walked out, she didn't even try to hide her excitement. She stood in the doorway, suitcase ready, and said, "Okello, you have no ambition. Musa can give me the life I deserve." Then she turned away and climbed into billionaire Musa Katenda's shining SUV, leaving Okello and their 5-year-old son Kyan standing outside their tiny one-room house in Barika town. For days, Okello felt like he was moving through fog. He worked small jobs to survive, cleaning shops, carrying goods at the market, anything to feed Kyan. Some nights he cried silently while his son slept beside him on their thin mattress. But every morning Kyan's little voice shook him awake. "Daddy, what will we eat today?" And that question became his reason to fight. Behind their house was a small patch of dusty land. One day, Okello planted a few vegetable seeds he'd saved from the market. He borrowed a watering can, cleared weeds, and spent hours under the hot sun. Slowly, green shoots appeared. People in the neighborhood noticed his fresh tomatoes, spinach, and herbs. They started buying from him. With the little money he earned, Okello bought more seeds, more tools, more soil. Then he started posting short videos online. Kyan helping him water the plants, Okello explaining how to grow vegetables at home, clips of their tiny garden turning into rows of fresh produce. The videos went viral. People loved the hard-working single father building a future with his bare hands. Agricultural companies reached out. Investors offered to fund his ideas. Within a year, Okello expanded into a real farm. Acres of land, greenhouses, trained staff, and healthy produce delivered across the region. He named the business Kyan Fresh Farms after his son. Soon, Okello was invited to international conferences. He became known as the man who turned a backyard garden into Africa's fastest-growing organic agribusiness. He wore suits now. He traveled. And most importantly, he gave Kyan the stability and love Nalifa once claimed he could never provide. Then one afternoon, as Okello prepared to give a major speech at an agriculture summit, Nalifa appeared backstage. Her makeup was smudged, her clothes wrinkled, her smile shaky. Musa Katenda had left her for a younger influencer, just like she once left her own family. She had lost the mansions, the shopping trips, the glamorous life she bragged about online. "Okello," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I want my family back." Okello stared at her for a long moment. He didn't feel anger, only distance. In the next room, Kyan laughed with Okello's team, excited to watch his father speak. A staff member called out, "Sir, they're ready for you." Okello straightened his jacket, stepped forward and gently said, "Nalifa, that life you chased? Never built anything, but what Kyan and I built, this is real." And as he walked on stage to applause, lights shining on him, Nalifa watched with tears in her eyes. She had left him because she thought he had no ambition. She returned to find him celebrated as Africa's new agriculture icon, and completely out of her reach. When Alira told Zayn she was leaving, she didn't even lower her voice. She stood in the middle of their small living room and said, "Jamal can give Ari a real father, a rich father. You can't." Then she picked up her bags, climbed into billionaire Jamal Mwansa's sleek car, and disappeared from Zayn's life like he never mattered. Zayn didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just stood there in silence, holding little Ari's hand while his heart cracked in ways he didn't know hearts could break. That night, Ari cried himself to sleep. Zayn stayed awake beside him, brushing tears from the boy's cheeks and whispering, "I'm still here, my son. I'll always be here." Every day after that, Zayn walked to the dusty printing shop where he worked. The machines were old, the air smelled like ink and metal, and the pay barely covered food. But he took every extra shift he could. He wanted Ari to feel safe, even if life was heavy on his shoulders. One afternoon, while Zayn was repairing a broken printer, a young documentary filmmaker named Leora walked in. She was searching for stories of ordinary people fighting to survive. When she saw Zayn, quiet, hardworking, and raising a child alone, she asked if she could film him. He hesitated but eventually said yes. For weeks she followed him. Zayn waking at dawn, preparing Ari's tiny backpack for school. Zayn fixing printers with oil-stained hands. Zayn eating dinner with Ari on the floor because they didn't have a table. Zayn smiling through pain no one else could see. When the documentary was released online, everything changed. Millions of people watched it. Millions cried. They saw a father who refused to give up. Donations flooded in. Business owners reached out offering help. Zayn used the money to open his own printing shop, then another, then another. Within a year, he built one of the most successful printing companies in the country. He hired staff, bought new equipment, and finally gave Ari the comfortable life Alira once claimed he could never provide. Zayn transformed, but he never stopped being gentle. Every evening, no matter how busy, he picked Ari up from school and took him for ice cream. Then one evening, Alira showed up at his office. Her makeup was smudged. Her clothes looked cheap. Her voice trembled. Jamal Mwansa, the billionaire she left everything for, had ghosted her. No calls, no support, nothing. "Zane," she whispered, reaching for his arm. "I made a terrible mistake. Please take us back. Let's be a family again." Before Zane could answer, little Ari walked out from behind him. Elira bent down with a hopeful smile. "Ari, baby, do you remember Mama?" Ari stared at her for a long, quiet moment, then stepped back and clung to Zane's shirt. "Daddy," he whispered, his voice shaking, "don't let her hurt us again." Elira's smile collapsed. Tears filled her eyes. Zane gently rested his hand on his son's head. "Elira," he said softly but firmly, "you made your choice. And we built a new life without you." She opened her mouth, but no words came. She had lost everything, and the family she abandoned no longer needed her. Zane lifted Ari into his arms and walked away, leaving Elira standing alone in the doorway, realizing too late that money was never the real measure of a father. Love was. When Kesa walked out of their small home, she didn't even try to hide her excitement. She grabbed her suitcase, kissed their son Jiro on the head and said, "Mama will come back when life stabilizes, okay?" Baraka Manji stood in the doorway, holding their boy's hand, feeling his whole world collapse. Kesa didn't look back. She chose a billionaire. Luxury, fancy trips, expensive clothes, over the poor life she shared with her husband and child. Weeks passed, then months, then a full year. Kesa never called, not once. Baraka worked as a delivery driver to survive. Early mornings, late nights, long dusty roads. He did everything to make sure Jiro had food, school fees, and a warm bed. Some days he was so tired he could barely lift his arms, but every time he saw Jiro smile, he found strength again. One hot afternoon, Baraka stopped to deliver a package in the city. As he walked back to his motorbike, he spotted an elderly homeless woman sitting on the sidewalk, struggling to open a small carton of juice someone had given her. Without thinking, Baraka knelt beside her, gently opened the drink, bought her food, and sat with her while she ate. He treated her like she mattered, like she wasn't invisible. What he didn't know was that someone across the street was filming the whole moment. The video went viral overnight. People loved the quiet, humble delivery driver who showed kindness when no one was watching. News channels searched for him. Organizations praised him. A major logistics company reached out and offered him a full contract, better pay, and training. Baraka accepted, and in just 2 years, with his hard work and gentle spirit, he climbed from delivery driver to regional manager, and then to CEO. He moved Jiro into a big home, hired tutors, and gave him everything he could. But even with success, Baraka stayed the same, soft-spoken, hard-working, grateful. Then one day, Kesa arrived at his office without warning. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the stress on her face. Rumors had spread everywhere. The billionaire had discarded her. The luxury trips stopped. The gifts stopped. She was alone and broke, and now she remembered the family she abandoned. "I want to see Jiro," she said, trying to smile. "I'm ready to be his mother again." Baraka looked at her for a long, silent moment. He thought of all the nights Jiro cried for her, all the birthdays she missed, all the promises she threw away. "Kesa," he finally said, voice calm but heavy, "you left us. He grew without you." Her smile slowly disappeared. She opened her mouth to argue, but Jiro appeared from behind Baraka, taller now, confident, looking at her with confused, distant eyes. He didn't run into her arms. He didn't call her Mama. He just stood beside his father, the only parent who stayed. Baraka rested his hand on Jiro's shoulder and gently turned him away. Kesa watched them walk off together, realizing too late that she left her family for a lifestyle that didn't last, and returned to a son who no longer knew her. When Ada walked out, Mandla Ngwenya felt like the ground had vanished beneath him. She didn't even hesitate. She picked up her bags, took their 4-year-old son Tindo and said, "Zuberi can give us the life you never will." Then she left, chasing billionaire fame with Zuberi Jatta, leaving Mandla standing alone in their small apartment, heartbroken and lost. For weeks, Mandla couldn't eat. He barely slept. Every corner of the apartment reminded him of Ada and their happy little family that no longer existed. Tindo cried himself to sleep at night, calling for his mother, and Mandla would sit beside him, holding his little hand and whispering, "Daddy is here, son. I'm not going anywhere." Eventually, Mandla realized he had to keep going. For Tindo, he borrowed a small cart, bought a few ingredients, and started a roadside food stand. He cooked every meal with care, pouring love into each dish. People started noticing. The flavors were different, the smells irresistible. He worked from dawn till late at night, serving anyone who stopped, always with a warm smile, even when his heart ached. One afternoon, a young woman filmed Tindo helping his father sprinkle spices over a dish. She posted it on TikTok. Overnight, the video went viral. Millions of people shared it. Comments flooded in. "Look at that dedication. A father who loves his child so much." Food bloggers and local media reached out. Within weeks, Mandla was no longer just a man with a food cart. He was a rising star, a celebrity chef known across the country for both his talent and his heart. He opened a proper restaurant, hired a small team, and built a life that was stable, beautiful, and full of love for Tindo. Along the way, he met Asha, a kind woman who supported him and adored Tindo. She wasn't trying to replace Ada, she just wanted to help build a happy family. Tindo grew attached to her quickly, calling her Mommy Asha without hesitation. Then one afternoon the news broke. Zuberi Jatta had been exposed for fraud. Ada had lost everything. She came rushing to Mandla's restaurant, tears streaming down her face. "Mandla, I made a mistake," she cried. "Please take us back. Let me be part of your lives again." Before Mandla could respond, Tindo ran up to Asha, hugging her tightly. He whispered softly, "She's my real mommy." Ada froze. Her eyes widened. The son she abandoned no longer needed her. Mandla looked down at her calmly, realizing that some doors, once closed, should never open again. He had rebuilt their lives, not for fame or wealth, but for love, and that love had already found its place. When Shani walked out, Sephu Karum felt like the world had stopped. She didn't even hesitate. She grabbed her bags, kissed their little boy Jahi on the forehead and whispered, "Daddy, I'll send money. I promise." Then she climbed into Mackenzie Dube's luxury car, leaving Sephu holding Jahi, staring at the empty driveway. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The money never came. Calls were ignored. Shani was gone, and so was the life Sephu had imagined. First, Sephu struggled. Rent, food, school fees, it all piled up. He felt crushed, exhausted, and unsure if he could keep going. But every time he looked at Jahi's small face, hopeful and trusting, he knew he had to. He couldn't give up. He remembered his old camera tucked away in a drawer, dusty and forgotten. One morning, he cleaned it, packed it with a few lenses, and opened a tiny roadside photography studio. At first, only a few locals came by. Sephu captured weddings, birthdays, and portraits with care, pouring love into every shot. Soon, people started sharing his photos online. His work was different, honest, vibrant, full of African life. One day, an international magazine discovered his studio and featured his portraits. Orders, requests, and invitations poured in from across the globe. Sephu's little roadside studio had transformed into a celebrated photography brand, known for capturing the soul of Africa. Then one afternoon, Shani appeared at the edge of the studio, exhausted and frantic. Mackenzie Dube had abandoned her, leaving her with nothing. She looked around at the bustling studio, her eyes landing on Jahi, taller now, confident, smiling, and sitting on the lap of Sephu's mother, his grandmother. "Jahi, baby, don't you remember me?" she whispered. Jahi looked at her, blinked, and turned back to his grandmother, calling her gently, "Mama." Shani froze. The son she had abandoned didn't need her anymore. Sephu stood quietly nearby, watching the woman who once walked out realize that some losses cannot be undone. He had built a life, a legacy, and a family without her, and that was more than she could ever take back.